Welcome to another edition of Inspired Stories, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing.
Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Ashley Dew, founder and CEO of Meaningful Beginnings Daycare. In 2013, she opened a daycare in her home and has since grown it into 2 large centers in San Francisco. Meaningful Beginnings was recognized as SF Gate's Best Daycare and Early Childhood Education Center. Ashley is a first-generation American and serial entrepreneur who has used her commercial real estate experience to identify prime locations for her daycare centers. She also consults aspiring daycare owners in opening and growing their businesses, and they are now looking at the possibility of franchising their operations. But before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to add over $900 per employee per year in net profits by implementing one of our proprietary programs. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. Now back to our guest today, the CEO and founder of Meaningful Beginnings Daycare, Ashley. I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I am super excited for our conversation.
All right, let's hop in. So, Ashley, tell me about the inspiration for first starting your daycare in your home, no less.
This goes back to 2013 when I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I was looking for childcare options for her at that time. There were no real good high quality daycares. There was either on the one end where you had the older grandmas in their homes taking care of children, and it was more like a babysitting type of thing versus daycare. And the other hand, you had something that was big, like the Big Bright Horizons and the publicly traded daycares. And so that was where I made the decision, like, okay, do I pay a lot of money to go to daycare, or do I go to a lower quality daycare and pay a little less? So there was really no middle ground. So I decided to drop out of college and take care of my daughter. So luckily at that time, our tenant moved out of our house, the downstairs area. So I went on Craigslist and bought a list of toys and things for the daycare, painted the rooms different colors, and then I went off and opened my own home daycare.
And so, how did you get your first client, your first student, your first child?
So for the first 6 months, it was I had nobody. It was just, super quiet. I posted on Craigslist, and at that time, Craigslist was a big thing, and so I had families come in for tours, but nobody signed up, and I think it was because I was young. I was only 20 years old, and I didn't really know too much about business, and here I am, like, asking someone to give me their prized possession, like, "Okay, I'll take care of your child for you." Even though I had my own at the time, I think it was just a confidence issue. And so, for 6 months, I had nobody, but I just kept going and kept going. And then finally, a family, they decided to give me a shot. And from that point on, once I got my first family signed up, everybody signed up afterwards. And then we got busy and we had a wait list and it just kept going. So it was definitely a mentality, confidence type of thing.
It was going to be my question is, do you think it was a confidence issue on your side, or do you think that once you had that first one, that proof of concept, that everybody else who came in was like, oh, it must be all right if somebody else has already vetted her?
Yeah, I think it starts off with the confidence, right? It all starts with you first. And then the fact that the proof of concept was proven, then everybody else came.
And so, 6 months, nobody. You're given lots of tours in between. That's frustrating. Like, how did you kind of push through that? What told you to keep going rather than throw in the towel? Like, this is never going to work.
Well, I think it's because I already put in so much of my time. Again, I painted each room a different color. I went on Craigslist, found used toys and old toys, and things that just were for sale. And I drove like far, like hours, just to pick up like a playhouse. And every day I was working on it little by little, and I was just working on the back end and the front end and the advertising, the logo. And because I put in so much time, I just knew like, okay, this has to work, and then I knew that there was a market for it at that time because, again, myself, um, I was looking for a good childcare center, right? So where else would I go besides my own since I've trusted myself? So a lot of it was because I already put in so much time and so much effort. I was already like deep into it, and the fact that I knew that there's definitely a market, and also I believe in myself ultimately.
Nice. And so how long had you been running it in your own home before you decided to open up a standalone center?
Um, how long? I will say it was about 3, 4 years in was when I decided I want to open a commercial center. At that time, my kids were so young, so it was kind of like a bit out of the ballpark. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, you know what? If I want to grow, I have to do it now, despite the fact that my children were still young. And so I got into real estate at that time just to make some extra income because the amount that we are bringing at that time was good, but it was not enough for me to open a commercial center. It was a lot of capital required. So I got into real estate, and all the money that I made into real estate, I poured into my first commercial center. And that was in 2019 when it was officially opened. But when I first started looking, it was 2017, 2018. So that was 3, 4 years after I've opened my downstairs home, downstairs daycare. And I had to go through 2 rounds of construction. I knew nothing about commercial real estate. I didn't know anything about lease negotiations. I signed the lease and I started paying rent pretty much like 2 months into it. Whereas now I've learned like, okay, I could negotiate free rent while I'm going through the build out process, while I'm building out. I could ask for tenant improvements. I don't have to pay for everything myself. And I didn't know these things. So I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning when opening my first commercial center.
And who was it that sort of taught you about those things afterwards?
Um, Myself. I think actually going through it myself, I learned a lot. And then after going into being in residential real estate for a little bit, I jumped into commercial real estate and I learned a lot, just transacting my own deals. And from that point, and also I negotiated a lot for our clients, right? And so after all that had happened, then I realized like what I had done wrong and why I'm in this position now. Well, during that time, why I was in that position and why, because okay, let me go back a little bit. Like, it was so expensive, much more than I expected it to be. I was expecting it to only be low six figures, ended up being high six figures because of the fact that we had to go through 2 rounds of construction. It wasn't just that; it was a time. There was so many things that went wrong, and I think it's a mix of just things that happened slowly throughout my life, like going into commercial real estate, then meeting all these clients and helping people negotiate. Then that really taught me, like, okay, this is now I know what to do for myself moving forward and how to negotiate and how to get the best deals. So it's just timing and luck.
And you were able to fund all of this development from your real estate business?
Hmm. Yes.
That's impressive. And what you mentioned that you had 2 different rounds of construction. Why 2? What is that? What happened there?
Um, Again, it's because I'm a startup right at that time, and I really didn't know much, and I was trying to save money because I was bootstrapping. It wasn't like I raised money and, I had unlimited amount of capital. And so instead of hiring an architect to go to the building department to help me with getting our permits and things like that, I tried to do it myself. So I went down to the city and talked to the fire to building, and one person will tell me one thing, another person will tell me another, and every time they told me to do something, I would do it, and every time when I went back, it was a different person that will tell me something else. And so from that experience, I've learned that okay, I can't cut corners. I think it's better to just leave the experts, let the experts do things that they know, because then it'll save you a lot more time and money in the long run.
And so how long did it take you to fill up that first center when it finally opened?
Mm. About 2.5 years, and it was during COVID when all this happened. So I
Oh,
opened the center in 2019, and then 2020 happened, and we had to close for 3 months. And I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do? We just started ramping up. We started with 5 kids. We're licensed for 50 kids over there. And so at that point, I think we're only at like 20. We're barely even at 50% capacity. So we're just freaking even, if even. And COVID happens and we're like, okay, what are we going to do now? Thank God they had the PVP. So that did help a little bit. We didn't get a lot though, because again, we just opened in 2019. So we didn't have a long track record. But because we were in this sweet spot, we were not super big and we were not super small. We were in the middle where we were the 11% of daycares that actually survived. Most daycares closed because if they were too small, they didn't have enough children to support their overhead. And if they were too big, they lost too many children where they also were not able to support their overhead. So because we were in this middle ground, we were at the sweet spot and we were able to keep running. And then everybody that closed, their parents and their families and those children ended up coming to us. So we ended up getting super busy during COVID.
Wait, did you just say 11% of the daycares
Mm-hmm.
survived? 89% closed permanently? Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's an almost
Yeah.
impossible number to believe. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a decimation if ever I've heard of one for an entire industry. And was that in your area? Was that the state of California? Where does that stat come from?
Yeah, that was in the Bay Area. Yeah, I'll have to double check, but I remember it was 11% that survived.
Wow.
That was it.
I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
and
that,
I did,
go ahead, Ashley.
and we're talking about not just commercial centers, like even the small in-home family daycares. A lot of these small family daycares closed, and a decent amount of commercial centers also closed.
So the silver lining to the tragedy that was COVID is that a lot of these centers closed, and because you were able to weather the storm, there were a lot of parents who were looking for a place to take their kids. Your doors were open. And so at what point during COVID did you see sort of this big influx? Was it later in 2020? Was it the next year?
Yeah, it was later in 2020 and ongoing. The good thing about us is that we also provide a lot of our clients. They were essential workers, so there were doctors, nurses in the medical industry, in the health industry, and so because we served primarily those type of demographics, then we got to stay open. Whereas a lot of the other daycares, because they weren't serving that demographic, they weren't allowed to stay open. That was another thing.
Okay. Interesting. And so then at what point did you have the confidence to say, this is going well, let's open a second center?
Mm. Uh, After 2021, when we saw our numbers, we had a huge profit margin. And because of that, we were able to open our second location and we saw the demand there. And my first location was primarily infant and toddlers. So we didn't have preschoolers. So a lot of the families that came and stayed with us, they asked us like if we could open preschool so that, they could stay with the company. And so the opportunity was there. And also the other thing was that because of COVID, a lot of the landlords that were willing to work with us. So I was able to get good negotiation deals, and it was just a good time. Even right now, it's still a good time. I mean, as you know, commercial real estate is not doing well right now, so it's the perfect time to negotiate deals.
Yeah. And so you opened the second center, and the second center has preschool in it. Is that right?
Infant, toddler, and preschool now. Yes.
And how is the preschool kind of playing out for you now that state of California has introduced state-sponsored preschool, for lack of a better phrase?
So this is where I've learned that I can't always just create something for what my clients want. I actually have to do my own research and understand the market well enough. So when we opened the preschool, we thought, okay, all of the families that are currently in our care, the infant toddlers, they will definitely go into preschool. That's what we were expecting. Now that's open, we're like, okay, that's not the case. We see that they're going for other options, right? Like the state funded options. And, there's like the universal pre-K for all now. And then there's also other options like language immersions and all these other different things. And now we can't compete with that. So the preschool side is a side that is not doing the best, I would say. And so moving forward, I don't know if I'm going to continue growing the preschool side because going back a little bit, the second location, we have more preschool capacity than we do infant and toddler.
Okay.
So moving forward, what I will do is have a smaller preschool and have a larger infant toddler side.
And looking at your website, I see that there's three new locations that are in process. Is that
hmm
right?
Yes, that's correct.
And where will the locations be for each of these? And what's the age focus? Is it the preschool toddler age range?
Now we're looking into South San Francisco, Burlingame, and the East Bay. So San Ramon or Walnut Creek. Those are the areas that we've been looking into, and they will encompass infant, toddler, and preschool.
You're still going to introduce preschool into each of those new
We
locations.
have to.
Okay.
Yeah. It's yeah, that's one of those things where we just have to have it. Otherwise, if we don't have it, they will just go to another place.
Now, I want to rewind a little bit to actually, hang on, address something you just said there. People would go to a different place, and that's because maybe they've got two kids, right? They've got somebody who needs to be in the infant space, and they've got somebody who needs to be in a preschool, and they want sort of a one-stop shop. Is that why you feel like you still need to offer both?
Exactly. Yeah, we have a lot of families in our care currently where they have an infant and they have a preschooler, and they stay within the ND family.
Got it. Okay, so now I want to rewind again back to COVID. Because there were several months there where there's this uncertainty. You're not sure when can we reopen. Like, what is this going to look like? Was there ever a thought in your mind to just throw in the towel? You'd just been through like this brutal construction process. It cost you so much more money than you thought. Now COVID hits. Like, was there ever a thought that like, man, the universe is just conspiring against me. I'm just gonna give up.
No, actually, during that time, I did not think about that at all the entire time because I think I was still in that heat of the moment. I just opened this, my pride and joy, my everything, and that did not even cross my mind. I just knew that we will get through it, we'll figure it out, and somehow, some way, we'll make it out.
Yeah. And I think what's great about some of the stories that you've shared so far, Ashley, is it shows like I don't want to call it the dirty side, but like the nitty gritty of what happens behind the scenes, right? You've opened these beautiful daycare centers. People drive by them all the time. You've got parents who bring their kids in. They're like, "What a gorgeous facility! That she's probably making lots of money." Like, and they have no idea of all the grit and determination that it took for you to get from zero to where you are now. And so I think it's really great that we're kind of highlighting some of those struggles. Like, man, for 6 months, like nobody would even give me a shot, when I first opened my doors in my home. And then, that picked up, and, now I open my doors in my first center, but it costs so much more money, and then COVID hits, and there's all these things that happen behind the scenes that people don't normally get to hear about.
Right, exactly.
So tell me a little bit about the curriculum that you have in place and sort of your overall approach to early childcare and education.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess I should share a little bit more about my background and why I actually got into this, besides the fact that I had to drop out of school to take care of my daughter. When I was growing up, I grew up with limited resources in San Francisco. We were, again, first generation American. My mom, she had to take care of myself and my four older brothers by herself, and she had to work three jobs. When I was growing up, I was super independent from an early age. And I think preschool was one of the biggest factors as to why I succeeded in life. There's actually studies that show that if you go to preschool, you have a higher chance of succeeding in life versus those who don't go to preschool. And when I look at just like me and everybody else in the family right now, I will have to say that I've probably gone a bit further compared to some of my siblings. Um, and because of that, like I just know how important the first 5 years of a child's life is. I think the fact that I had preschool and I had the good teachers, I had good caregivers, and that was the only sense of stability that I had. That brings it into now in the future where I want to create the same environment for children. Um, Again, the first 5 years are the most important. It's your caregivers either make you or break you. Like they can either traumatize you or they will help you grow and thrive through life. And so with that, my philosophy is the curriculum that we use right now is Reggio Emilia, where we encompass the entire community. We believe in the child as an individual and collaborative work, and the environment is a third teacher. So, what that means is that in the Reggio Emilia inspired school system, the way that the classrooms are set up, it's very natural, it's very zen, and it's more calming type of environment. Like you will not see plastic things everywhere. All of our furniture is wood, it's oak, and it's a light color. There's lots of trees, there's plants, there's nature, all the curriculum that like our themes. It's a week-long project. It's not like a day type activity. Like for example, oh, we're just gonna color today. That's it. Like we're gonna talk about, oh, what colors are there? How do you create these colors? And it starts from Monday all the way up until Friday, and even longer if the child is interested. So it all goes down to interest of the child. And when we teach the child in this way, it helps not only build their confidence, but also helps them build their social emotional skills. Because again, we're with the community, right? So meaning that it's not just a project based on just a child alone, it's going to be with everybody in the classroom along with the teachers. So very similar to Montessori, except Montessori, they're more focused on the individual child, it's individual projects, whereas Reggio Emilia, it's a community project. And with this approach, I feel like it goes back down into my deep core again, like one, the stability, two, the environment, three, the caregivers, and four, like that community feeling. Like, you know, even if we don't, we're feeling alone, as long as you have the community, now you're all one.
So where did you pick up these philosophies? Because when you first started the daycare, you're very young, right? You think you said you were 20, you dropped out of college because you were having your own child. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to guess that you hadn't had the opportunity to absorb these philosophies through a work experience or through your college education up to that point.
Mm. So I did drop out of college because that was originally my nursing program. And so I dropped out of my nursing program. However, I did go back to school when I opened my daycare just to study early childhood education, because I wanted to know what I was talking about. So I did go back to school, and that did play a big difference in terms of where our philosophies are and how our approach to early childhood education is.
So you touched on this a little bit, but I want you to go into a little bit more detail. I'm curious to understand better what a typical day looks like for one of your students.
Mm, okay. Well, it depends on the age group, right? But let's just say it's a preschool, like the child is a preschooler. They will come in, they'll get dropped off. And during drop off, they'll wash their hands, they're clean, and they'll go potty, they'll go into their classroom. And depending on the time that they're dropped off, because there's a time period, if it is earlier, then they'll have AM snack. So they'll eat along with their peers on at a table. And then after that, they'll clean up, and then it's circle time. And circle time is where they'll introduce the theme, the songs, they'll talk about their day, what they are interested in doing, what we plan to do. And then that's also where we read out like the themes, like the theme songs and whatever it is that the curriculum is that day. And then after that, they'll go outside. They have outdoor time for anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, assuming that the weather allows it. Then they'll come in, they'll have lunch, and then it's nap time. And after nap time, they have to get, so usually nap is about 2 hours or so. And after that, then they will do an activity, depending again on the interest of the child. It could be, you know, art, it could be blocks, it could be anything that they're doing at that point. And then after that, there'll be PM snack or outdoor time, and then it's pretty much pickup. So every day it's pretty structured, but it could adjust depending on the interests of the children.
And so you're providing food for the students there?
Yeah, we provide food. We also provide potty training as well. Yeah.
Wow. I wish that would have been accessible to me when my kids were that age.
Yeah.
That was a
Well,
challenging
the
period.
and the interesting about the potty training piece is for me to retain good talent like my teachers, because they're the asset in the company. We all the potty training fees actually goes to the teacher that potty trains the child. So we don't take any piece of that.
So what does that look like when somebody says, "Yes, please potty train my kid"? How does that work in your
Yeah.
facility?
So we'll have to have a plan with the parents. We have to ask them like, okay, do you feel like your child's ready? Do we feel like the child's ready? Are they mentally prepared? Because it's a teamwork. Right? Even if we're potty training the child, if they're not doing it at home, it's going to defeat its purpose. So once we decide that it's a good idea and we're all on the same page, then we'll go ahead and start the potty training process, and we'll talk to the lead teacher. The lead teacher will also say okay, and then they pay the fee. Then they potty train the child for a month. Usually, it's no more than a month, and by that time they'll be completely potty trained, and then whatever the fee is will go to the teacher.
Yeah, I want to touch on something there. I love what you said. I think you said employees are your greatest asset, right?
Mhm.
And in this challenging employment environment, right, there's a big labor shortage. It's hard to find and hold on to good people. What are some things that you've done and found success with to do that?
Okay, that's like one of those things that it's an ongoing challenge for me, like identifying the right people in the right seats and the wrong people in the wrong seats. It goes back to that book Traction. um, the good thing about my daycares right now is that I still have 2 employees that's been with me since day 1, like, in the downstairs of my home. So they've worked with for me for over 10 years now, and they're still with us. And I think what I've found from those 2 employees is that when they came to work for me, they did not have a vision of the future, and they didn't know what they were gonna do. It was just like a job for them at that time. Um, and because I was able to train them and they worked hand in hand with me or side by side, because at that time in the downstairs of my home, I was doing everything. I was the cook, I was the cleaner, the diaper changer, the business, the business owner, everything. And I think because I was able to train them and give them a future in terms of like where they want to go, because the moment that I opened my large daycare, they came with me, right? The commercial daycare. And then I put them through schooling. So we give teachers stipends and we give them bonuses the moment that they complete courses. And we just kept encouraging them to go to school, get more units and etc. Because that's the only way they're gonna get a pay raise, right? They have to have these things. And I think that was so my whole point of that is that basically growing from within and being able to provide someone a future that they've never seen before, I think, or that they can't even envision. I think that's a big thing. So, kind of being like a role model and mentor to these teachers has been very helpful. And I have a philosophy within our own company where I like to grow from within. So every time we get a leadership person that leaves, let's just say if it's assistant director or whatever the case is, I always look inside first. I'll talk to my executive director, like, hey, do we have anyone in the organization right now that we can level up, that we could grow, that we could bring up? And we always have a second in command type of thing, where there's always an assistant director below whoever, whatever that position is. Just so that we're always going to have incoming leaders. So, with that said, growing from within is one major thing. Also, being a good support person and role model for them is really important, especially in today's day and age. Is not the money is not it. That's not the only thing now. Now they want to know like who are they following, who is their leader, and are their leader going to do they feel inspired from this leader, and will they continue to be there for them as they continue to grow in their journey. So I think growing from within, being a good role model, and also of course like identifying what your team needs is a big thing, and also creating a culture. Like the culture is so important, the culture of your team. So we do go through lots of challenges with finding people. But one thing that I've found very helpful is this one company called Workstream. And so how that works is the moment that we post an ad, um, it will go onto all the job boards. And anyone who's ever applied for any position, it gets archived into our company database. So the moment that we're looking for somebody, we go back into that archive and we're able to mass message everyone, and then we're able to fill those positions much easier. So that's like more of a logistical type of thing that we're able to do. But when it comes to the staff, it all comes down to leadership, growth, and continuous improvement and professional development.
And with this work stream tool, are you finding then that there are folks that applied for a position maybe months ago that are still available or still interested?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Because they could be at a position where they're not happy with, or they could be at a position that they are happy with. And or sometimes it doesn't matter whether they're happy or not happy, there's always gonna be changes, right? So sometimes if there is a change, they might just reach back out and say, like, oh hey, like something's changed, are you still looking?
So, Ashley, tell me a little bit about the consulting business and how you've helped other aspiring daycare owners.
Hmm. Yeah, so through my own journey, as I mentioned, I went through so many issues with construction and just learning about the building department and learning where to get the money from. Like aside from the real estate business, I also like I had to dig into my own like personal loans and credit cards and things like that to try to get it going, right? But at that time, had I known what I know now, I would have probably went an SBA route. So because I've been through so many things, I just realized one day, like, okay, I wish there was a consultant out there that could help daycare owners, right? Or even people who have in-home daycares right now that may want to consider opening a commercial center, because I know it wasn't easy for me. And I talked to a lot of daycare owners that only has in-home centers, and they tell me like, yeah, they would love to, but they just don't know where to start. So then I'm like, okay, I feel I have enough experience. I've grown from zero to nothing. I mean, from nothing to here, and we're going to continue to grow. So I feel like I could probably help people. So yeah, I mean, I did something very simple. I put a additional tab and service on our website and said, okay, now we're going to offer consulting services, and that surprisingly was a big hit because people started finding me. If you look up like daycare consulting services, we actually pop up organically. I'm not even advertising that. And so my first client came from word of mouth. One of my friends who wanted to open a daycare reached out to me, and they wanted to work together. So I helped them. And so the first one, she was a daycare owner that had an in-home daycare that was open for 6 months with no type of touch. There was no tours, nobody reaching out, no
Oh,
inquiries,
even worse than
nothing.
your situation. At least you were giving
Yeah,
tours. He wasn't even talking to
right.
anybody.
Yeah, and so I came in, I evaluated her space, I looked at what she's doing currently, and I saw the problem. I'm like, "Okay, it's because you're not doing any type of branding or marketing. Like, there's nothing right now. You're not on any platform. There's no Google business listing. You don't have a Facebook page. You don't have an Instagram page. Like, all these things are important. You don't even have a website yet." And so I came and helped her with all the branding, all the marketing. I put her onto all these different social media platforms and like daycare platforms. And then, so we started working together in January. And by March, she already had 2 students enrolled and she had ongoing tours. And now her business is continuing to grow and she gets tours all the time. So that was definitely proven. I had another client where the wife, she was a preschool teacher for over 20 years. They wanted to open their first in-home daycare. They also did not know how to go about it. It was all just licensing stuff. They needed help with paperwork. So and I told them like, you could do this yourself. I don't want to charge you for paperwork, But they're like, well, like we would rather just do it one time without any mistakes. And I'm like, that's a great idea, like. And so yeah, I helped them put together their paperwork and I got them licensed. And like fairly quickly, less than a month. And then after that, now we're into phase 2 where we're helping with their branding, their marketing, and getting the clients through the door. And I have another one where they're commercial daycare owner operator, and their revenue was in the negative, and they needed to turn it around. And so I came in like, okay, well, how are you getting clients right now? What are you doing? Where are you advertising? So that's ongoing. And then another client that I work with right now, she is looking to open a daycare center, and so I am giving her all these different advice with like, okay, SBA loans, which ones to look for, how you should negotiate your lease deal, what you should be looking for in the buildings, whether it's a new building or old building, because if it's an older building, there's a lot of maintenance that would come in that you won't even think about. Whereas a newer building, there's not as much maintenance. So that's been going well. And I think I find a lot of joy in that because I'm able to, it goes back to like the teacher thing where I was saying like I'm able to help grow their mindset and help grow their mentality and help them see a future that they never thought was possible. So when it comes to the consulting side, that's exactly what it is. I'm able to help grow businesses, individuals to see a bigger picture and get to a different point in their life that they never even expected.
So if somebody's listening and they're interested, Ashley's website is meaningfulbeginnings.org. And you can find the consulting services under the About tab. And you mentioned, Ashley, that one of your clients, the daycare, who was operating, but operating in the red. They were running at a loss.
Mhm.
What you kind of briefly touched on, like, okay, how are you advertising? What are some of those levers that you're looking to pull to boost sales, lower expenses? How are you helping them out?
I think so. What I found is that it depends on that where they're located and where their target audience is. Like sometimes you gotta look at it like, okay, is it the product? Is it the people? Is it the demographic that you're targeting? Like which one is it? And I think specifically for this location, they were in an area that's not, I would say, it's not the best location, right? And I found that being in a government program would be a better way for them because then you get subsidized care and you're serving a different type of demographic. That's one. So identifying where your channels are coming from. So the revenue channels, right? Like for this one, they were only private pay individuals. Whereas now I'm like, okay, maybe you should consider this going with the government program as well. I'm not saying only fully government subsidized. I'm saying a mix of both, right? So you could fill in some gaps. Some other thing that we introduced were drop-in care, which is what we do as well, because like nowadays people are looking for flexible childcare options. They only had full-time and part-time. There were no flexible options. But when you have the flexible options, you're able to open it up to a different market now. So that was another thing. So strategizing that. Um, and then three, also finding the people, because then with this owner operator, I think sometimes like as an owner, you always think like big, or how will I say it? Like your confidence is out the roof, or you're a little big headed sometimes and you don't want to like go back into the basics. I think that was something that came with training too. I had to like tell like, hey, look, I know that your ego is here, but you have to think, what do you really need for the business? So that was like a mentality type of thing. um so yeah, going back to that, is it the people? Is it the product? Is it the demographic that you're targeting? What are those? And in this situation, it was a mix of the three.
You mentioned a drop-in daycare service. Talk to me about how that works. From somebody on the outside looking in, it would seem like that's kind of a scheduling nightmare. Like you're trying to plan your staffing because you've got to keep certain student to teacher ratios. Yeah, talk to me how that works.
Yeah. So with us, um, so with the ratios, it gets really complicated. So with infants, it's 1-4 ratio by state licensing requirements. Toddlers 1-6, and preschools 1-12. So let's just say if you only have, let's talk about preschool. It's 1-12. If you only have 8 children, you're still going to have that one staff member no matter what, right? So that leaves 4 spaces available, right? And same with toddler and infants. So no matter what, you're going to have the staff anyway. So you might as well fill up the spaces.
And is there a big demand for this? Somebody who's only like they wake up one day and they're like, "Hey, I just need daycare today," but not on a regular basis.
I wouldn't say it's a big demand, but it's about 20% of our business right now.
Oh,
Um,
okay. That's
yeah, well,
significant.
I guess it is decent. Yeah. So, yes, because one, there's a lot of schools where they close, like, so there's like the Jewish Community Center school that is in San Francisco, and they close a lot, like on many different days. And we have a partnership with them where their director sends their students to us when they're closed. And so, for example, right now during summer, we have a lot of drop ins because they're closed so much during summer. We also have like situations where, like, let's just say their day their nanny or babysitter is sick or whatever the case is, and then they
Mhm.
need to drop in. We also have situations where like sometimes uh sorry, I lost my train of thought, but basically whatever the case is, like if they want to just drop off to go to a massage appointment, or they have work or last minute things and they need to drop off, then that also comes into play. The other thing too is we're working with Bright Horizons, and we also have we help them with their backup services. So for example, if they have families that are traveling from LA to San Francisco to work, we will be like one of their go-to backup services, drop-in daycare. So they will drop into our center as well. So it's all over the place, but it could be from traveling parents to just running errand parents to just the fact that the schools are closed. That's all.
See, and this was great. I'm glad that I asked that, outsider question because initially I'm thinking this isn't an opportunity. This is a scheduling nightmare. And you reframed it. You said, well, if we've got the space, right? If we've got one teacher to 8 students, we've got 4 spaces there to fill. So if
Mhm.
somebody raises their hand and says they want to come in, great. We've got some unused capacity. So rather than the challenge, it's the opportunity that you spotted.
Yeah, and also like because we are larger, right? We have a lot of students. Children are always calling out sick. They're going on vacation, and spaces are going to open up. We're never 100% full capacity. That's rare because there's always somebody out.
That makes sense. So you're thinking about franchising now. Talk to me about that thought process.
Yeah. So I'm currently in an accelerator program. do you know, I don't know if you guys know what accelerator programs are, but basically they help fast track companies. And I'm just thinking about how we're going to grow our revenue. The only way that we could grow our revenue is obviously through more locations. But each location, to do it on our own, is very capital intensive and it's a lot of work and a lot of manpower. So we're exploring the idea of having a franchise model. And actually, one of my clients I consult for, she's interested and she's like, I would love to be the first franchise, already having the model built in, all the operations, the curriculum, and the team. So that's that we're exploring it right now. It's not set in stone, but I do feel like there's a bigger opportunity there because of the fact that we're able to grow the brand without us having to do it ourselves. We plan to have our own chain still, no matter what, but we want to have that franchising opportunity.
I'm curious, Ashley, what are some of the most common concerns that parents have when starting their kids in a new school like yours? And what can you tell them to put their mind at ease?
Um, So many things. One will be, will their child be okay during drop off? Like when they have to leave their child when they've been with them 24/7 once the child's been born. I think knowing that it does take time is very important. And some parents, they say they want to ease their child in with 2 days a week to have a drop in. That is actually worse for the child sometimes because now you're throwing off their schedule, especially when the child's young. For example, if they only come in like Tuesdays and Thursdays, but then there's Monday, Wednesdays, Friday that you're not in, it's not consistent. Young children need consistency. So sometimes I will say full-time care is better than part-time care because it's more consistency there. And then two, the sick policy and illness procedures because children are going to get sick in daycares, especially because there's so many children, there's adults, there's germs coming from all areas. The first 2 weeks within starting daycare, your child will definitely get sick. And it is normal. And I know it is scary, but at the same time, it does build your child's immune system. So if you're not able to cope with those things, child daycare is probably not for you. And that's something that we always say too. Like in our tours, we're always like, okay, what are you looking for in your daycare? What are you expecting? So we can manage each other's expectations. Because again, we're not going to be able to satisfy everyone's needs. And so, yeah, the main two things are the sickness and also the separation anxiety. Separation anxiety, not just from the child, but also the parents. And speaking of that, what I've learned too is that as a parent, you really have to trust your caregivers. If you do not trust your caregivers, the child's going to feel that energy and they're going to feel the same way.
Mhm.
So, one other thing that I've trained my staff to tell everyone, like all the incoming families are interested, I always tell them if they're not 100% confident in our services, do not sign up. Because then it's going to be this ongoing battle where we have to prove ourselves to the parent when it's like all we're trying to do is provide a really safe, clean, comfortable, caring, loving environment for your child. And I mean, we are here to provide the space for children. It has nothing to do with, you know, anything else. That's it. Like that's our main priority. And even with our teachers, like we tell them too, like whatever's going on in your personal life, you have to leave that at the door and be present for the children. That's what it comes down to. Because if you cannot do that, then you're not meant to be a caregiver. So with that said, the relationship with the caregivers and the family is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, Ashley, if you can share maybe one or two stories, like success stories of like a child who came in that maybe was having a little bit of a hard time and you guys were, able to connect and help them.
hmm let me think. I'm not in the day-to-day operations anymore. However, I do know that we had one family where during drop off was always very challenging. Like the child would always cry, and then the family would think, "Is it because they don't like the daycare?" They're like, "Oh, like I don't know why why my child's acting like this. Is it because of you guys?" And it all went down this like kind of like rabbit hole. And then we had to tell them like, "Hey, like this is normal. This is how children are, and children they go through different phases too. Like for example, one day they might love the daycare, one day they want to stay at home with mama. It's always different. So what we did was we had a teacher just stay with that child specifically during the first like 2 months. It was hard though, because again, we have ratios in place, right? But we wanted to support the family because we also knew that the family needed the care. And they actually looked at other daycares and they told us, okay, we may consider leaving or whatever the case is. They looked, and then later on they came and I said, you know what, actually, we found that you guys are actually the best, and you guys, when we prefer to stay with you guys. And that's not a first time thing. That's happened multiple times before already. And so we had a dedicated teacher stay with the child and just make sure that they're okay, and whenever and just get them comfortable. And I think that was really helpful, and also building that relationship again. The teacher kept talking to the family about like what she's doing today, how she's feeling. And we have an app, right? We use this app called Bright Wheel, where we update the parents on how the child is doing. So there's pictures, there's photos, there's whether the child ate or not, there whether they what type of like potty they had, whether it was wet or dry, whatever, so it's just consistent updates. I think that was really helpful too, letting them know that, hey, like your child is okay. In the beginning, it looked like it was bad because she kept crying, but then now she was able to calm down. So, I mean, that's not just that family specifically. That's a recurrent thing all the time with new students. It's ongoing. But there was another time where I don't remember exactly what the issue was. I think pricing was the thing. They said that we were too expensive, and so they left. And then 3 months later, they came back and said, "Can we come back to the daycare?" And that has happened before, a decent amount of times, actually.
Well, I think that one specific story that you shared there, is a great highlight of how you really go above and beyond. I mean, you've got these, state mandated ratios that you have to worry about, but you were so concerned that you wanted to make this parent happy, wanted to make the child comfortable, that you're like, you know what, we're going to put this one adult, the same adult with this student, the entire time, and it worked. And they went and they looked around and said, you know what, you guys are awesome. We compared you to what else was out there. We're going to stick with you.
Yeah, we even had children that would have like behavioral issues, like they will bite a lot or they might hit, right? Then we have to put teachers on that child too, and then work with the family to say like, okay, hey, let's continue with positive reinforcements. Let's tell them that this is not okay, and things like that to help get the child out of that phase. Because a lot of times it's phases that they go through.
Mm. Ashley, what's a serious challenge that you had to overcome, either professionally or personally? I'd like to hear kind of what that struggle was like and some of the lessons that you learned coming through the other side.
Yeah, I think there's two. On the personal side, um, it was definitely a mental challenge. Like when things start going bad, which it has, when things are not doing as great as they were, it's a drain on you. Like you know how you asked me, did I ever think about giving up before during COVID, right? But now I've been doing this for over 10 years, 11 years, and I am definitely a little bit burnt out. And there are times where I'm like, okay, is this really what you want to do? Are you going to continue doing this? Especially because of the fact that like I'm building this thing where I feel like it's to help support the economy with like the workforce, with people, for children, and it all goes into like people. But I don't feel that reward. Like, meaning like with my staff or with my team, like I don't feel like they get what I'm trying to build for. Like I always tell them like, okay, I'm building because I want to make sure that when we exit, you guys exit too. Like I want to make sure that my teachers are able to exit with a decent amount of money so they could survive and they could continue doing what they want to do, whether it's school or whatever, like their passion. Because as we all know, teachers are underpaid significantly in America. And so that is my goal. And I think like the fact that I try so hard, I'm always like building and I keep building, but I get like kicked down a lot. And it could be from families too, because they don't understand. They think that here I am, this like business tycoon that's making so much money. And when reality it's like, no, we are still a small business. We're still trying to get by. And now I'm actually considering like, okay, do we raise money? Because there's only so much we can continue doing on our own. And if we want to grow, we have to go that route. So going back to that, I think it's a personal thing. Like we're like, okay, do I want to continue doing this? And then of course I go through these like ups and downs, right? And what I've learned is that you don't stay in the lows for too long. You don't stay in the highs for too long, because the reality will just be right there. So and like even during a time when we like last year Q4, we were significantly down. Like we were like running out of money, and I was like, okay, how long is this runway going to be? Should I consider closing down like one of the locations? Because it was just one. Like the other one's doing fine. One location's not doing as great. And then I was just thinking, okay, do I want to keep doing this? Well, but then I had to look at my teachers, my team, the children, and the type of importance that we play in the overall economy. And I was just like, you know what? You've been building this for so long. You will get through this, and we will do it. We'll just figure it out. It's one of those things. So the mentality thing is a big thing for me, like overcoming my own mental mind. And that's one. Two, leadership. I always thought that I was a great leader until I realized that maybe I'm not, and it's because of the fact that we're always learning and that we're not perfect. I went through a huge leadership change as well, not that long ago, where one of my leaders left, and she took five. Well, she didn't take, but five teachers resigned in one
Wow.
classroom. And here I am thinking that we were doing everything great and thought that like, we were perfect. And when that happened, it was reality like hit me. And I was like, okay, actually something's wrong. Like I think I'm not doing as great of a job as I thought I was. Um, and so that was something that was big because now I've learned why leadership is important, why I have to be there. And I think part of the reason was because I was hands off. I was busy thinking about the big picture that I was not in the day to day, and I didn't think about what I just basically I delegated too much. I think that was the issue. I delegated, and I thought everybody else will handle everything else. When in reality, it's like no, it doesn't work that way. Like you still have to be in the day to day somewhat. I'm not talking about like actually changing diapers and things like that, but you have to be involved with your team, and you have to build relationship, you have to build rapport. um, and then I remember when the whole leadership team left at that time, that was when the parents were all upset and everybody was so mad at me. And I think coming from that was different because I'm usually the type where I feel like I'm easily liked and people love me, and they could see that I'm genuine, I'm a good person. And when everybody was so upset, I was like, okay, the only person that could be blamed here is me. And I think accountability was a big thing that I had to learn. Because the whole time I was like telling myself like, oh, because the director did this or because they did this, that leadership did this, and that's what I was thinking. But then what it really comes down to is, look, no matter what, it was still under my watch. Um, and so overcoming that was pretty hard because it was a mental drain on me. Like every day I would go home not even knowing like which hat to wear now because I'm just so stressed out. And I felt like the world was coming down because business was not good, leadership was all crazy. The parents hated me, and I was worried about what if reviews came, and then now like how is that going to impact business? And it was just ongoing. But luckily, good thing is that I still had good talent, and I think what was important was being able to remember gratitude and being grateful for what I do have now, and knowing that like where I came from, like that I came from nothing, like literally nothing. We built from nothing, and where we are today, it's quite impressive. And I think I failed to remember the fact of like, okay, you were here before, and now here you are. So giving yourself some credit was something that I like did not know because I was just too like laser focused, always looking at the big picture, big picture, big picture. Um, but yeah, so basically the two main things was my own mental state and then also leadership, and not letting things get too out of control where you can't over delegate too much.
This was a fantastic share, Ashley. I loved so many things that you touched on here, because I, I'm trying to think where to start first, because one of the things that you highlight is, it's like if one sort of bad thing happens to you, sometimes you can weather that, right? But the way you described it was sort of like coming at you from all directions, and you've been doing this for 10 years. You're tired, things aren't going well. One of the centers is struggling. Your leadership team, they leave. Now you're questioning yourself. You're like it just the walls, the way I'm hearing it, it felt like the walls were kind of coming in on you. Excuse me. And one of the things that I think um, you really need to give yourself credit for is the ability to sort of step outside of yourself and witness what you were doing and saying, you know what, maybe the problem was me. maybe part of because that's not easy to do, especially when the world is sort of dumping on you, right? It's very normal. It's a very natural human reaction to put up a shield and say, well, it's that person, it's this outside force, this isn't me. Like, it's just, everything happening to me. You're like, what can I do? What can I control? You're like, there's probably some things that I could do a
Mhm.
little bit differently with my leadership style here. I was delegating a lot that felt like the right thing to do because I was growing and I was putting, this vision in place. Now I'm seeing that I stepped out a little bit too much. This is an opportunity for me to correct that. Now, you were talking about, Q4 last year. It was a pretty tough time financially. Here we are, we're recording this in late July in 24. What do things look like now as you've kind of come through some of that darkness? How do you see the future of this?
Well, so Q4 of last year, we were not doing well. Then Q1 of this year was when the whole leadership transition thing happened.
Okay.
I mean, we're still going through a little bit like coming out of that because right now we're only in Q2. Wait, we're going to Q3. We're in Q3 now, beginning of Q3, right? And so we're still going through it a little bit. We're still figuring things out, but it definitely looks a lot brighter now because I feel like my new leadership team, well, not new, I still have my solid, but the leadership team specifically at this location, I have more confidence in them, and I feel like my leadership style has changed a lot more. I feel like I'm more in tune with them. I'm like, doing happy hours with them. I'm going out with them. I'm trying to like just be around a little bit more so they know who their leader is too, and involving them in the growth of the company and telling them like what we're doing and different things that we're doing. And so I think that has really shifted, and that I feel like we're more of a family now when it comes to our leadership team. Whereas before it was so now it's before it was more like vertical, right? Whereas now, like I feel like it's more like together. Um, and so right now, like the future is definitely a lot brighter. I will have to say, we're in terms of our team, I feel a lot more solid. I definitely feel very close to them, and I feel like they're going to be able to help us grow. Like all of us together will grow each other to get our company to the next level. Um, yeah, and so we are still feeling it though. We're not completely out of it. But I just like my own mental state though is definitely better where I feel like, you know what, again, like you mentioned at first, some things are out of my control. I can only control what I can control. And that's it. And I say the same thing to my leadership team. There's always things going on in childcare. There's always something going wrong. And I say the same thing to them. You can only control what you can control, and you can't hold on to things that go wrong for too long. Because if you do that, that's going to kill you. You're not going to be able to get out of it. And again, don't stay in the dark for too long, and don't stay on your high for too long, because the reality is always just around the corner. So I think it's like being flexible and being able to pivot is very important.
Yeah. I liked another word that you used in there, gratitude, right? Because it, like you said multiple times, a lot of it is really about a mindset. Like, there's always good things happening. There's always bad things happening. Where are you going to put your focus? Where are you going to put your energy? Because whether we realize it or not, whatever it is we're focusing on, that's what we're going to get more of, right? I mean, so you're going through some tough times. You've got some, real challenges to work through, but you were able to take a step back and say, you know what? I'm really grateful how far we've come and how much great things we have, how many great things we have in place, at this time. Yes, there are these challenges, there are these bad things over here, but I'm not going to dwell on this. I am going to be grateful for what I've got over here, and then I'm going to work to try to fix these things.
Mhm.
No.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you have to do that, like, because there's always gonna be things going on, and, if you dwell on all the dark times, then how are you gonna get out of them?
Who were you able to lean on during some of these challenging times? Who was helpful to you?
I think my network is extremely important. Well, I have 2 business coaches as well, so being able to just talk it through with them, but also talking to my network, like, my friends and family, it was helpful, but ultimately, it was me that had to get out of it. Like, it wasn't like you know, I threw out like a what do you call that? Like when you're skydiving, kind of like, what are those? A parachute. Kind of like,
Mhm.
I wanted like someone throw me a parachute. That would be great if someone was able to throw me a parachute and save me, But ultimately, like, it was all, again, I'm gonna keep talking about it. It's your mental game, like how mentally strong you are. So, talking to people and letting them hear me out, kind of like a psychiatrist type, like a therapist, that was great. But ultimately, it was me that had to get out of it on my own.
Yeah. Any particular mentors or books that have been helpful to you, either through that challenging time or just overall in your personal and professional development?
Yeah, one book that changed my life is actually the book from Anthony Robbins called "Awaken the Giant from Within." Um, that was my first time reading a self-help, self-development book, and this was over 10 years ago. It was like 12 years ago. It's a really thick book, and in the first chapter it says, if you haven't got through chapter 1, you're only 10% of the people who are willing to dedicate the time. And so when I saw that, I'm like, okay, I'm someone that likes to challenge, right? So I'm like, okay, let me go and finish this book. And that book talked a lot about just mentality, mental strength, and believing in yourself, and all of that. And that was a book that taught me, like, okay, I could do anything in life as long as I put my mind to it. That was life changing.
I like that. I haven't read that particular book, but big fan of Tony Robbins' teaching, so I'm putting that one on my list. Uh, Ashley, what's a fun fact most people wouldn't know about you?
Mm, fun fact that most people wouldn't know about me. Well, I already talked about. Well, I mean, I guess I wouldn't say fun. Does it have to be fun, or does it just have to be a fact?
Something interesting. We'll call it an interesting fact.
An interesting fact. I will say that most people, given my background now, that I am in childcare and that I have childcare centers, I'm education. Most people would not know that I grew up in a household where my dad had deep substance abuse.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's yeah, and that was life changing for us, obviously. But most people don't know that. Most people who see me assume like, oh, you probably came from a good family background. You probably had this. You probably had that. That's probably how you got started. But it's like, actually, it was quite the opposite.
Do you want to say more about that? Do you want to give a little bit more behind the
Mm,
curtain?
yeah, like my dad, ever since I don't even know, like 3, 4, 5 years old, like he was on drugs, on meth, and he was always coming in and out of prisons. He'll come home sometimes with like bruised eyes when he was like beaten up. He would like just and he would always ask for money. He stole everything that we had in the house. He used to like he'll go into my room and dig through everything to look for money. When I was in elementary school, I remember like getting called out of the school because he was looking for me. And I was outside my classroom, and my dad comes up to me and is like, "Do you have any money?" I'm like 9 years old, and I was like, no. Where am I gonna have money? Like, where am I gonna find money? And he was just like, "No, I know you have that. I know you have it somewhere, blah, 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 blah." And then after that, I remember my teacher, like, they saw that and then they were super concerned. And they called my mom. And of course, like, all these things happened. But aside from that, he also abused my mom a lot. Like, he would hit her. There was lots of violence, lots of violence. And I never had stability growing up. Like, I wouldn't know if I was going to go to school or not the next day, depending on what happened the night prior. Like, there was always cops at our house. It was yeah, it was a mess.
Is he still in your life?
He came back into our lives about 7 years ago. We tried to give him a chance again, but he just went down that whole thing again. Like, he came to my house, took money from me when I was on vacation. And this is me being older now, right? And so now it's just to a point where I have kids of my own, and I don't want to bring that into our family. So no, I mean, I know where he is, I know what he's doing, but I'm not in contact with him.
How has that shaped you as a person, as a mother, as a professional, that whole life experience growing up?
Um, I think just being very open and understanding that everybody has their own issues and they're going through their own battles. Um, and also the fact that, like, I think I'm really understanding, like, I could, because even now when I'm not mad at my dad, I could see why things had happened. I could understand why things didn't work out between him and my mom. I could understand why he could have went down this way. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, and it comes out with his childhood too. Like, he was part of the Vietnam War. I'm sure there was a lot of like trauma there and things that he had to like deal with, but he didn't have the right resources. um so because I'm able to see that and forgive him, like, I totally forgive him. I'm not holding any grudges or anything. I just don't want to bring his bad habits into my life now.
Yeah.
But I think me being like that now, I'm just, again, flexible, open, and very forgiving.
That's terrific. I appreciate you sharing all that, Ashley.
Mm.
Ashley, I just have one more question for you today. But before I do it, I want to do two things. If folks are listening today and they like today's content, please hit the like, share, or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. The second thing I want to do is let people know the best way to get in touch with you. Maybe they're interested in upcoming franchise opportunities, maybe the consulting, maybe they've got children in the area that they're looking for a nice daycare. What's the best way for folks to connect with you?
Mm. The best way will be to send me an email or just visit us at our on our website at meaningfulbeginnings.org. You could send it to the general email inbox and they'll forward it to me. That's probably easiest. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn, Ashley Do. Instagram is also fine in Ash's World. Yeah.
And do is spelled D-U, everybody. Ashley Do, D-U. Okay, last question for
Right.
you, Ashley. I'm curious, how do you see your industry evolving in the next 5 years? What do you think the big changes are that are coming?
Um, I definitely see that there has to be more flexible needs in childcare. So, like the drop-in things that I was mentioning already, is important, especially after COVID. I also see that there will be a need for special needs services when it comes to childcare, as well as language immersion, which is where the franchising for us is important because I plan to franchise it to operators that has these backgrounds. So either language immersion or special needs. Those are really important. And also, I think that there's going to be a big need for early childhood educators. With AI right now, it's taking over a lot of different jobs. And I think one of the jobs that will not go away will be teaching when it comes to young children. I know China's creating all these robots and things that says that, you can have the robot watch your child, but I don't think that's likely. So yeah, definitely like a need for flexible care, special needs, language immersion. Yeah.
Perfect. Ashley, I want to be the first one to thank you for sharing both your time and your story with us today. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Anthony. This was fun.
Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.